Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. Greg, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan. My pleasure.
Yeah, so we got connected recently through acquaintances and everything, and I'm a huge fan of all the content you're putting out there and kind of the rethinking of this agency model, which is something that I think has been bubbling up for a while. And there's Tyler Cowen, who I really like, who is kind of a thinker, university guy. And he sort of makes the point that like this internet is this contraption that we're just now sort of figuring out how to use. And I feel like the sort of part of that, it's kind of that part of that wider trend where like what we're seeing is the agency model is changing. What it means to have an agency is changing. You have publishers becoming agencies. You have agencies becoming software companies. You have software companies becoming publishers. But I think you're definitely a key piece of that. So without preempting your message too much, before we get into all that good stuff, would you mind talking a bit about your background and how you got here and so on?
Yeah. So out of college, I started at an agency that was a part of Omnicom. So one of the big beasts. We represented Pepsi, Unilever. And so my days in agency, like when I talk about traditional agency, like I'm in my 40s. So I'm not the 18-year-old or who says they have an agency and have an agency background. Like I actually know what procurement is. And like we were in production studios and things like that. So we were like full service to the max in a very specific key part of our clients' businesses. And we had maybe 20 clients tops, but each of those clients were worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year in revenue, right? Which is kind of what most traditional agency is. You were like an outsourced department, marketing function, multiple marketing functions. So I started in kind of bigger agency, went into small boutique, but still represented big brands. And then I ended on the client side building out a mobile marketing team for a retail brand called Cabela's, which was now bought by Bass Pro Shop. And so I was on the client side responsible for managing and hiring agencies and consultants because we had a team of 3 on my team and we had to leverage outside parties. And so kind of like saw both sides of that and then went out on my own, failed miserably as most do, and then fell into love with marketing automation, built my own agency serving online kind of course creators, authors, speakers, coaches, basically behind the scenes of a lot of big name people doing their launches, their automation funnels, webinar funnels, all that stuff. And we were successful. We were growing. And I think we were around like the 650, 700 a year mark. And I had a team of like 13 people total that not were all full-time. It was a mess and I hated it. And I was like, I'm building the exact same thing that I escaped. Like I didn't like this big machine, tons of people. It was like fire drills from clients, being on the hook for driving all these things. And so I just knew that there had to be a different way. And that's kind of when I stumbled into what is now, I believe, like the alt agency model. So background, big agency, small agency, client side, hiring agencies, had my own agency, one of which failed, one of which did fairly well until I fundamentally pivoted.
Yeah, thank you for the background and everything. And it's funny because when I think about the early days of starting sales schema and starting this business, it was often coming from a negative, like I don't want to be doing X, so I'll do Y. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like when you were thinking about pivoting the marketing automation agency, like what were you going to for inspiration? Like what did those early experiments look like and kind of what was behind them?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of to your point, like I think every person that at least I've encountered, whether it's freelancer, they've started as freelance, ended up building the agency, they kind of end up more so than not this like accidental agency owner. Whether you were in an agency or you were behind, you were on the client side and you were like, I'm gonna go do my own thing because freedom and schedule and like I'm in control. And you get the first client, and you're like, well, I need more money than that. So I need another client. And so like you get another client. And because you realize very quickly that it's also a job, just a different kind of job, that you start figuring that you got to just get more clients to make the money that you want to be making. And like if you don't pay attention, you just are kind of recreating the thing that you probably just left. And so I think it's because we get into that survival mode, honestly, of, well, I need more clients because we need more money. Oh my God, I'm drowning. I need more help. Let me go hire the person to help me. And you are not keeping enough of the money and you're shelling it out to other team members or other freelancers and consultants. And now you're like managing a small little army of people but not making enough money to even warrant having that little army of people. And that's what you saw. That's like what I was exposed to. Oh, like there's just a lot of people. How do you solve a problem? You throw people at it. Like that was agency. And so we run into agencies now and we were like the same. It's like if you're under $1 million and you have 13 people on your team, like there's something fundamentally broken with your business. Like it's like at a minimum, you should be having 250K in revenue per full-time equivalent. And most agencies that I run into are nowhere remotely close to that, especially the small ones. And so I think we kind of like early, we get stuck in this trap of too many people, too wide of services. Even with us being as specialized as we were, it still sort of happened because it was the I got to get the next client because we need more money game. And we hit the point like it kind of accidentally happened. Like I wish that I kind of was smarter and saw it coming, but I was on a sales call with a prospect who I would have loved to work with, quite frankly, but like I was already working nights and weekends and on vacations taking the laptop. I got a story about that one that was a catalyst moment in my life. And we were on this call and he's like, I need this. I love the help. I'm like, dude, I can't, I don't even have room to take you right now. Like maybe in 2 months from now, like I'd be able to figure out a way to bring you on. And he goes, you know what? Like I have an admin on my team that knows how to, at the time we were using Infusionsoft. That was like the main platform, which is now called Keep. So marketing automation tool. And he was like, my assistant knows her way around Infusionsoft fairly well. Like she sends the emails, she like kind of goes in there. He's like, so we can like execute on some of the stuff. Can you just show me what you do? And I was like, yeah, sure. And he's like, cool. Like, well, how much for that? And at the time we were charging like 15 to 20K for like our done for you service. And I was like, 7,500. And he was like, done. And I was like, what? Like I was like taken back, caught off guard that he like wanted me to just show him what we were doing. And I was like, all right, well, let's like schedule an hour here. And we had all this stuff pre-built. And like I was literally able to click a button, import all of the automation into his app. And then it was like we just recorded a handful of Loom videos explaining how to manage the dang thing. And then we had a couple like coaching calls, if you will, like a couple Zoom calls where we talked it over and like answered their questions. And I was like, that was the easiest fulfillment and the most profitable time that we have had in a long time. I'm like, why are we not just helping give all of this stuff to people and guide them to do it themselves? Because one of the biggest, and that was the first aha, because one of the biggest pain points that we had, and again, some people, if I had known better earlier on, I probably would have mitigated this risk and I'd probably have an agency that grew faster and I still wouldn't like. So I'm glad that this happened in this way because I get the people that are like, oh, well, you just didn't know how to do it. I'm like, of course I didn't know how to do it. I was figuring it out. I was going along like everybody else. But what that one client taught me was the piece that we hated about our lives managing this agency came to the things that we had no control over, which were the client wanted to out of nowhere do this new campaign and they needed us to do it. And the timeline was unrealistic. And even if we charged for it, which in some cases we did, rush fees and all that stuff, it still derailed my life. Oh, I now have to be somehow on call this weekend when this client wants to do a weekend launch. They do their big Black Friday promotion. Well, now I'm like working on holidays. Like, and I have family here. The nature of the relationship and how the client were so dependent upon us pulled us into all of the administrative side of their business that we hated. And I was like, well, if we show them how to do it, they're going to do the administrative stuff. And so that's how we started realizing that the stuff that we didn't like, we liked building engines. We didn't like being the person who was sending the report on how many people clicked the email. Like they should know how to do that. And so it started like identifying these things that I developed this belief that there's a lot of things that agencies do, and we were there too, where the client should know how to do a good amount of what you're doing. And they would actually be better off if they did and did that part in-house because they'd be faster, they'd be nimbler. And sometimes that is the difference of making a lot of money or losing a lot of money on for your clients. And so to weaponize them on certain things that took it off your plate also just made us more profitable. It didn't make us any less valuable, but we helped them become stronger in-house. And that was just kind of like the beginning of, I have to look at this moving forward a bit differently, because if they're dependent upon us, we get treated like employees at some point or another. It usually happens around the 6-month mark on average. Like things are going great. Before you know it, you're being treated like an employee. And like it
Right.
seems to be kind of a relative time frame for most people that I talk to.
Yeah, it's almost like there's that catch 22 where either they're not dependent on you, in which case you're kind of labor and a commodity and your days are numbered, or they are dependent on you, in which case, like, say goodbye to your weekends. Right. So
Yeah, it's like,
yeah,
yeah, and it's, you know, the if you suck, you'll get fired right away. If you're so good and that you can charge a lot, it's only a matter of time before they're like, we could do this in-house more affordably. And so it's like you're almost incentivized to be mediocre, which is like you can't be
right.
too good and you can't be too bad. You got to be somewhere in the middle. And for some services, and I think this is where the rise of productized service came from, which we're huge fans of, is like some of these things are labor intensive that like are repeatable tasks and should be done in a very productized manner. But what I think a lot of agencies are guilty of is giving away their strategy for free. And the reason people came to us for how we did webinars was because we built over 1,000 of them that made a lot of other people a lot of money, and we knew what not to do. And that's experience and that's knowledge. And so it's not just the fact that I can set this thing up in Infusionsoft in 10 minutes. It's I know what to set up in Infusionsoft. And I know how to make sure that there's contingency plans and all of that for when certain things happen that always happen. And like that's worth more than 2K a month retainer. And so a lot of agencies like will either give away their strategy and expertise for free. That is what the value is really at the end of the day. And they give it away for the commodity of the pair of hands. And so, yes, you could put a line item in for strategy. That's a good step in the right direction. But like, there's ways you could monetize that expertise beyond just having to be the labor. And I think that's where we start to see with the alt agency model come alive, is that you're not just labor. You can be selling workshops. You can be doing consulting. You can be licensing your intellectual property and have multiple income streams that allow you to have a small, lean and mean team, but still have scalability that isn't dependent upon just people. And again, there are some agencies that we talk to that like, hey, like your service is a commodity and you've been that way forever. But like, there's a lot of people that like, wow, you have a methodology and you have an approach and you know the ins and outs of your domain because you've been a practitioner for a long time. And it's those people that I think, like, if you have true expertise in a domain and like experience in a certain area, you're probably sitting on multiple six figures, if not more, of income just from that. That has nothing to do with you doing any more labor than you're really doing. And that's kind of where I was like, all right, the like you said, Tyler, who I actually don't know, I'm gonna check him out. The whole ethos behind this alt agency, alternative agency, is that the lines between online education and then the far other spectrum of like true, what most of us have defined as a traditional agency, consulting, info, courses, all of that stuff, the lines are tech, like AI, like there's the lines are so blurry. And that's an advantage to us. And I think a lot of people are like, no, like the value is that I'm doing it for you. And it's like, that's not always the value. Like your labor is not always the value. And like, if you start looking at these other alternatives, you could be potentially in a better vehicle for what you're trying to achieve. Now, to that point, I think a lot of people want to be a creative shop, for example, and do all of the things custom. And that's great. That has cons, just like everything has a con. They all have pros and cons. And so what I'm finding now more than ever is I don't find many people that are trying to build the next Omnicom. And we see those continuing to dwindle, right? Like we see very small boutique specialized firms that leverage tech in unique ways, and like solve very specific problems. And like we're going to see more of that. And as that continues to happen, the knowledge and expertise around that is very monetizable.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree. But to kind of like play devil's advocate, I think the done for you aspect is definitely commoditized. Everybody knows it is, but it's also very sticky and heavy. And it's like the hardest thing to remove.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I'm not saying you have to get
yeah,
rid of done for you altogether.
right.
Some people might want to. Some people might want to, like a good friend of mine, Jay, they're a lead gen agency in Australia, and they work with literally every single top ecom brand in Australia. And his agency was going great, still going great, but like they got a lot of clients that shouldn't be spending what they're spending on an agency. And so he bolted on a training program, like basically a group training consulting program for anyone that was under a certain amount of ad spend per month. And that current program does over $1 million a month right now. And it's the only way you can even get into his agency, because only the best of the best brands can work in his agency. And so he's gated his agency, his done for you service. Everybody wants it, but until they've done the foundational stuff that he teaches in his training consulting, like you don't qualify to be in the agency. And so like he has fewer clients in agency. It does like 2 million a year, but his training program is doing $1 million a month, because there's way more people that are still early on that can't justify the expense of being at that type of agency. I think most agencies should start following suit of, you work with fewer clients that pay a lot more money. And if you look to traditional agency, like I kind of started with, the agency I worked with is called Tracy Locke, still exists. Maybe 20 clients on the roster in a given year, 20. And they're, I think, 9-figure business, right? We have agencies in our world that have like 50 clients paying $1,000 a month. The operational complexity of that will kill you alone. You need to be higher priced. Like that's what we should be taking from the traditional model, is like fewer clients that are done for you, that are like the creme de la creme clients, like maybe 10 or 20 clients a year at this like extremely boutique price point, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Again, there are always exceptions to the rule for sure, but most agency owners that I run into, and I don't know if you run into, like they're not trying to build the next Omnicom. They're like, I want to be around for my family. You know, you're about to have a child. Like they want a balanced, integrated life. They don't want to be working 80 hours a week. They don't want to be managing hundreds of people. And so it's like, if that's you, then there are better models for you to follow.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And I think that one thing I'd love to get your insight on is just like, what are those early days of transitioning or pivoting an agency look like? Because you're so used to people that are just so happy to give you tons of money to wave a magic wand and take everything off
Yeah.
their plate. And now you're saying, hey, you're
Yeah.
going to have to do the work. We're going to teach you stuff. You're going to go back to school. You're going to go do all the work again. And that's it's a tough objection to get over. So I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Yeah. And I think everyone's situation is going to be a little different, but how we did it and how we typically advise clients to do it is, for us, a lot of our clients still come to us and they're a little too generalized. So we help them kind of first get their main core offer really streamlined. And we want to figure out how many clients in this new format. And that format doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing done with you yet. This might just be like the more streamlined, simplified core offer that like they can repeatedly deliver over and over again, still done for you. But it's fundamentally a different offer than what their current quote unquote legacy clients are having. So we have the new thing. How many clients do we need of the new thing to replace one or multiple of the clients of the old that are bleeding us dry in some way, shape, or form? And so we have our clients go through an exercise where they calculate fundamentally their income per existing client. And we identify, hey, like for us, we had like 5 clients out of 25 plus that like we were fundamentally losing money on. And those 5 also took up like 80% of our bandwidth. Now that's our fault. Like I didn't know what I was doing. And like we gave away the farm. We kept bending over backwards because we didn't want to lose them. And it created no real structure. But nonetheless, it was bad. And so we realized that just one client in our new offering could replace all 5 of those bad ones. That's like how little we were charging. And so we just started playing the math of like, all right, like when we get the next one over here, we go have the conversation with the one that is hurting us the most. And I didn't personally want to burn any bridges. And so like I love the clients that we were working with. And I'm thankful that I have relationships with all of them till this to this day. And I was like, look, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, here's where we're at. If we're going to keep doing this, we need to like look at a different way of doing this. And I know that that's on me. So like, here's my suggestion. And basically every single one of those clients that we needed to transition out of, we had like a 3, and the worst case was like a 6 or 8 month transition plan to migrate out of being their partner. And so I had a runway, and I'm like, look, like I just had candid conversations, but it was backed by me replacing them first. So I'm going to go replace them with a new client in the new way because it's more leveraged, it's more profitable, it's more predictable. I was having no problem getting those clients at the new rate. Every couple one of the new, I'd go have a conversation with the old. And it was kind of like for anyone that is on a video, like it was kind of like this. It was like that. And it took about 8 to 10 months to like phase out the bad people. Now, I chose to do it that way. We've had clients that were like, I have enough savings where I'm willing to just go all in and part ways with all of these people right now. And we've had clients that have literally like cleaned half their clientele within the first like 60 days, which I didn't have the risk tolerance for, but they financially were in a position where they were able to withhold that. And so I recommend doing it as fast as humanly possible, but making sure that your back end is covered if things should hit the fan, right? Because everyone has different obstacles, like their income, their savings. If your team is a certain size, like which of these team members are going to be maybe staying, which of them are not. Like there's multiple difficult decisions and conversations that need to be had that is going to be unique to every single person. But long story short is how many new can replace how many old. And I try to keep my revenue at the same level or close to it. But I just try to get it to be 100% of my new clientele versus the old clientele.
Yeah, that's great. I think one thing tied to that is ego, and emotion and sort of like number go down, therefore I go down sort of feelings. How do you and your clients deal with that?
Varying ways, some of which are good and some of which are bad. Yeah, I think for most people, when it was me, and I say this, I don't say this to make it sound like I was like so strong mentally or anything. I think was naive. And I was in so much pain that I just saw that every new client was me closer to the path that I wanted to be on. And as I shed some of the expenses of unnecessary team members during that time, I never really felt like my ego was hit because I don't think I focused on it too much. I didn't become aware to that whole like the ego hit until really we had a lot more clients dealing with it, quite frankly. I think I was just too in the thick of it. So I mean, I think for our clients, the fact that we had been down this path and we have like a whole spreadsheet where we help them calculate and put together their plan and like, hey, like what do the savings look like? Here's the sequence. I think having a game plan on how to approach it helps them kind of get clear on it. But there's still always oh wow, the number went backwards. And so when the number goes backwards, almost always though, the expenses go backwards equally, if not more, and we see a little bit more profit too. And so it's like we're just focused on the wrong number because we've all heard it. What is it? Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash flow is whatever king, something
Survival.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the case. Like a lot of our egos are tied up in, the top line. And quite frankly, I know a lot of agencies that have really sexy top line and we're way more profitable than they are. And I make more than the owner does. And it's like, that's like not good. Like, I mean, it's not a healthy, sustainable business. So
Yeah.
I think it's just calling out some of those things. And again, most people, specifically our clients, like they were the technician, they were the practitioner, and they never learned the business skills that like we're sort of helping them develop through this process of like, here's how we look at our numbers, here's how we look at the P&L. Like you have to understand these things. And once they start to grasp those things, many of them are like, they're like, oh yeah, like I'll take it, I'll take the hit on the top. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm going to be better faster. I can see the light at the other end of the tunnel now because of that. So I think it's just trying to use logic and show them the bright sides of it. And that the whole analogy of sometimes you got to take one step, two steps back to take three, four steps forward. And so while it's a hit or you go backwards in revenue or anything like that, it's a temporary move that is giving us the room to actually go past that
Yeah.
in a better, healthy way.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there's sometimes tears.
Yeah.
Let's face it, building proposals is a pain for most agencies. It drains your time and energy, and the fear of putting in all that effort only to be ghosted by prospects is real. But what if I told you there's a better way? Introducing Smart Pricing Table, the game changing interactive proposal software designed specifically for agencies like yours. Developed by a former agency owner, their powerful tool cuts down on the back and forth, incorporates upsells seamlessly, and lets you build proposals at lightning speed. No more grinding it out and leaving money on the table. It's time to create a repeatable system where your prospects can upsell themselves. Learn more at smartpricingtable.com/DAG and schedule a demo today.
Yeah, well, I guess tied to that, and I'm thinking of this because the interview you did with Mandy Ellefson a while back, where
Oh yeah.
it sounds like there's people that can't do it, right? And then they just kind of fall back on their own old ways, or like, how does that play out? Are there people that you
Yeah.
see that actually do make the traditional model work and become the next Omnicom? Or if not, like, what's usually stopping them from making something like this work?
I mean, the real answer is courage. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, I think that's like the most underrated entrepreneurial skill that exists because like you have to have courage to let go like at certain sizes, right? And like, and to your point, at larger, and I'll circle back to why this is important. Like the thing that Mandy and I talked about in that episode was like, I'm trying to catch agency owners between 20 and 50K a month in income, like of revenue, because that's the most opportune time for me to help make this pivot happen in the most seamless, less chaotic, life threatening way. When we get the clients that are over 1.5 million, 2 million, and they have 15 plus people on their squad, the logistics become more difficult. And oftentimes they have to do it slower, sometimes because of promises that they've made to staff or things like that, and or again lack of courage to not have difficult conversations, and they then decide, well, I better figure this out, and they'll stick with it, and they'll just try to find the operational opportunities to clean it up versus to truly pivot, which again will probably take longer and still cost a lot of money, but they're unwilling to like the sunk cost, like they're unwilling to walk away from all that they've put in, and they're unwilling to, in some cases make hard decisions. But also for some cases, like clients don't want the alt model, which is fine. Like they're like, no, like I envisioned having this Omnicom thing, and I realize that it's crappy because of the way I'm doing it, but I still want to figure out how to do it right. And that's sort of like where I see people working with Mandy make sense. Like she's like, a lot of her clients do super big deals, right? Like she's helping her clients charge 6 figures in annual income per client. Like, and that's, not uncommon for her. And custom work comes along with that, right? Like operational complexity, while she helps you simplify it, still is going to be more complex in operational drag than what we preach. So some people just are not willing to. So I think courage is part of it. But, and again, back to I don't think that this model is necessarily for everybody, right? I think that you have to have certain values. Like a lot of, and she can correct me if I'm wrong. So if you're listening and you don't know Mandy, don't take this as this is Mandy. But like, I feel like people that tend to work with her are still very growth oriented they put a lot of value on the scale of their revenue. Like they want to tout big numbers. My clients, while they want to grow and make a lot of money, will not do so at a compromise to their lifestyle or their health or their family or anything like that. So while having higher income is better, we have plenty of clients that come to us like, if I make the same amount of money next year, but I work 20 hours a week, I'm happy. And I think that's just like a different prioritization. And I don't think either one is wrong. Like, you might just be in a different season of life where you like scale or die. Like, that's good for you. Like, that's not me. And most of our clients are not that way.
Yeah, and this is going off a little bit to other non-business areas, but I think now more than ever, it's not even so much that people and business owners are figuring out what to do, but they're trying to figure out what to want. There's like a meaning crisis. And it's
Yes.
not like when I was growing up or the 80s or the 90s or something where everyone's just growth, all of that all the time. I think there's a lot of disillusionment. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and kind of how that's playing
Yeah.
out to
Have you
clients.
read the book Wanting?
Yes. Wait, Luke
Oh,
Burgess. I love it. Mhm.
yeah. I mean, that book freaking blew my brain. And I think, to your point, depending upon how old the listeners are listening, we're at an age where the concept behind the book Wanting, for those that haven't read it, is the mimesis, right? It's like everything that we want fundamentally comes from modeling what someone else has. And that's where our desire comes from. And the models that we had growing up were few, were our parents, and same for them. And so all we knew and all we were modeling was like the American dream, like the working class. Like, that's what we saw. Now you could dance on TikTok and make more money than most human beings that have real expertise. And because of social media, you're exposed to thousands of new potential models every single day. Like, we didn't have that. And like, our kids will, which is scary, also I think empowering in some ways. But like, that's the thing. Like, now we're starting to see that there are so many different ways to do it.
Yeah.
And like, the alt model, while there are some fundamental principles and frameworks, loosely is, I don't think there's any one right agency model anymore. As an agency, your job is to serve your clients and transfer value. Historically, what I was modeling was, we do that through labor, because that was all we ever knew. That's all we ever saw agencies do. That's all that service businesses did. And now there's knowledge workers, and there's information, and there's consulting and mentorship and all these things that existed back then, but we were just less likely to be exposed to it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's everywhere. And we have a menu of options that we can choose from to transfer value to our clients. And for people that are in our generation, which is like a lot of who my clients are, it's like, they're now being exposed to the fact that there are just more options, right? And
Yeah.
they have a say in which one fits them better. And sometimes it is just a fit, right? Like, I could be better at consulting and teaching than I am at actually like running a team of agency, like a team of technicians. Maybe some
Yeah.
other people are the same. And so I think that's super, super interesting. But yeah, and one of my mentors says, everyone thinks the hardest question to answer in entrepreneurship is, or the hardest thing to do in entrepreneurship is knowing what you want. And he said, but they're actually wrong. The hardest thing is actually admitting what you want. Because the second you admit what you want, you are going to face the judgment of the person who's going to say, oh, but well, why not do more, Greg? Why not build a $50 million a year business? You're not maximizing your potential, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're going to be exposed to the criticism and other people judging you once you actually admit what you want.
Yeah.
And people know what they want. I just don't think they're willing to admit it.
And I thought about this recently in reference to Alex Hormozy, because I love his stuff. I know you've had him on your show, and he talks about how people will get so open arms about him and his lifestyle and working, not overworking, but working so much. And it's so funny because it's like, to me, I'm like watching this and it's like, I think that his perception is that people come to him to find out what they should do, but I think they're mostly coming to him to figure out, as a mimetic model, to figure out what they should want. So when he wants something that's out of line with their values, it creates this massive uprising against them, which is super interesting.
Yeah, and
So
what's thankful that I have got to break bread with him and Layla a couple times, and while we're not like super close, I feel like I've had conversations with him pre-blow up of his audience and stuff. And I mean, A, I think he knows exactly what he's doing. B, despite how frequently he will tell people that most people shouldn't model what he is doing, they're going to do it anyway. And like, it's kind of like the double-edged sword. You can't scroll through any social media platform without seeing some agency that has this like ridiculous guarantee right now. and it's all starting to fade. And I know many people that have made their offer so irresistibly good that it's impossible for their client to say no, that they've started adding things to their service offering that they're not good at, that they actually have made them hate their business just to get the client to say yes, because now their offer is irresistible. But now they effing hate their business. And it's like there is like a little tidal wave off, like a wake behind some of these moves that people have made by trying to implement some of these things that they've seen through these models. And I don't think it's his fault,
Right.
but it's just the world that we live in. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting observation, because it's like, yeah, I mean, how you do it and the other externalities of that decision matter. And he probably couldn't agree more if you asked him. But
like everyone's going to be giving, like after his most recent book, like if you saw his launch, like,
yep.
All right, everyone's going to give away all of their value for free, right?
Yeah.
And have no way to monetize. And it's like, okay, some people will win doing that, but more are going to lose, because he's doing that for a different reason. His whole game is to only get people that are above like 2 million profit.
Yeah.
And he can afford to give all of that stuff away for free because he needs 12 deals a year, maybe, if that. Whereas like that's not the case for a lot of people. And for a lot of people, they could be actually charging more money for their expertise if they just actually charge for it.
Sure.
So,
and
like,
even if
there's
you
going to be kind of that little wake too.
Yeah, and even if you take plenty of really useful pages from his book, a lot of the times with a done alongside you model, it's not even just the teaching, it's the accountability, it's the being there, it's the support structure, it seems like, as well, right? So that makes a lot of sense.
Like if you look at his gym launch model and the evolution that it went through, and again, he talks through it. I think people are just kind of skipping steps that are actually critical steps. He was flying around the country helping people launch their gym, and he got tired of doing it manually and traveling around. And so he's like, well, how can I just tell you what I did and you do it, right? And so the first version was very consultative, right? Like, hey, I'm going to train you, I'm going to tell you what to do. Started creating content, his methodology, his approach, his scripts. He handed over his SOPs, which most agencies probably have. And there were still parts of their service that they did for their client, but there was fewer of them. Like they still help build the funnel. They still help them launch the ads, right? There was still technical done for you component to the service, but like they still had to watch videos, fill in the templates, record the videos themselves. There's a mix, like, and that's where I think like this, I use the term hybrid, but like a hybrid service. Like, how do you use videos, checklists? How do you guide and consult someone? And on certain pieces, do done for you work that raise the perceived value of it, that heighten the likelihood of success or the time to value, that you find the right mix of DIY, done with you, done for you. Like people think that done with you means that the whole experience needs to be done with you. Like if there's some DIY and there's some done for you and there's some guidance, like that's a done with you model. It's like a mix, right? And so like depending upon what it is you deliver, you might be able to lean heavier into one side of that spectrum or continuum or the other. And that's exactly what they did. And the gym launch was a licensing model, right? And that's the sticky part about their model was you'll never have to, and it might be different now, but like they talk about this in original podcasts where they got interviewed. They worked with gyms. That was it was very homogenous, right? Like every gym could use the exact same word for word template, right? Change the colors, change the logos, they could even use the same face. Like Alex was in the ads for like the gym in Milwaukee for a long time, right? Like, and so they were licensing that. And the sticky piece is they never have to worry about writing an ad ever again or figuring out their promotional copy ever again. And when someone's doing that for you on your behalf, it's tough to walk away. Even if they were the ones going into Facebook and setting up the campaign. So there's other things that are valuable in that. I just think back to why most agencies can't do what he did is because their audience isn't homogenous, because they're not specialized enough. They haven't narrowed down on their niche. And so that's where it's like there's still too much custom stuff to make that actually work.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
I think there's a lot of room for done with you in agency world. And I'd even argue that most agencies listening that are done for you in air quotes actually are probably more done with you than they think already. Like if you have your client filling out a questionnaire and you take them through an interview to gather certain assets, that's done with you.
Yeah,
like
that's a really
you
good
have
point.
them record a video and you gave them a script because their face needs to be in the ad. That's done with you. Like you're already doing it.
Once you actually deconstruct it, it's not as much done for you as you think. And I know we're getting towards the end of our time. I think one more tactical question I have is, a lot of the time, if you're in a traditional agency model, that's a lot of our clients. Yeah, maybe they're working with 20, 30, 40 big heavyweight clients throughout the year. They could be getting their business through outbound if they're working with us, or if not, they're getting referrals and it's organic and all this sort of thing. And then you're like, okay, the price per client goes down, the scale goes up. I got to win X% more clients to make up for the Y heavyweights. How much of this working is contingent on the acquisition channel? Are you then having to go learn Facebook funnels, LinkedIn funnels, a new marketing skill set to make this work?
I think in most cases, yes, you're going to likely have to learn acquisition. I think the repeatability so the clients that are scaling the done for you service, where it's like mostly word of mouth and referral, that's great. Like you should have word of mouth and referral. Like I know some people poo-poo on it. They poo-poo on it because it's not reliable and consistent and predictable at the early stages. I mean, it can be very scalable. And as Hormozi talks about, like it's at a level of compounding that no other channel can compete with. Like you tell one client tells 4 people, those 4 people tell another 4 people. Ads don't do that. You get 5, 6x ROAS, like you're crushing, but like that's not even remotely close to the compounding that a referral can have if you have a good referral engine. So I think that's where some of the folks in agency world start to fall, is that to reach a level that they're trying to get to requires them to become a marketer and a salesperson and to become known, which is really the definition of advertising, right? Like to become known. And they're not willing to do those things, and they won't acquire the skill sets to do those things. And so whether they decide to go done with you and bolt on this more profitable stream or not, it's like they still, to even scale the done for you thing, they need to figure out an acquisition channel. So I think for all agencies at some point, you need to figure out a reliable way to get leads and clients every single day, week, or month, whatever your cadence is. And for the agencies that are like, I'm on a path to sell, right? Your evaluation is going to be heavily based on, do you have a repeatable way to get clients? And if the only way you get clients is referrals, that is going to dramatically decrease your valuation of the business, right? And so this is where like a lot of agencies get to like $1 million a year, 2 million a year, and they're miserable and they want to sell and they realize that they'll get nothing for it. And then so they have to tough it out fixing it. There's not great multiples when the agency is heavily dependent upon your face and there's no repeatability in lead acquisition. So yeah, I think they all need it. I do think though that there's an over indexing on the value of acquisition, in that, and Hormozi talks about this too, like once you get to a lot of people say like once you get to 1 million or 3 million to get to 10, it's actually about keeping customers. It's not about getting customers. And I think most agencies equally have that problem, right? Like I forget what report I saw, but there was like the average retainer lasts like 6 months or 8 months or something like that. And so like if you're still churning out every 6 months, then that's going to be more a roadblock in scale than you figuring out acquisition. Because if you're already at a higher point, your moat, your value is going to be on how long clients stay. I think most people, because everybody thinks they want leads, it's the sexy thing to talk about. If you look at any really strong agency, service business, really any SaaS business, the money is made on lifetime value. Who can keep people the longest? And that game doesn't really start to become important to most people until they've already crossed the 1 million rate. Usually like between 1 and 2, I think people are like, oh crap, I could add 10 new clients a month, but if I'm losing 8, like all that lead gen is for nothing.
Yeah.
Like it's only a matter of time before it catches up. I think that's quite frankly difficult. I mean, it is for most people, and that's why business is not easy. But long-winded answer, yes, everyone needs to figure out acquisition. I think every agency needs to be figuring out organic as well as paid, because you don't want to rely on any one of them. Outbound, like Alex says himself, Jim launched sold because outbound. It wasn't relying on his face. It wasn't relying on paid. They had a very repeatable, scalable system in outbound. I'd argue that outbound is still very hard, and as it takes a little while to get it going, you got to be committed, but it's a viable, repeatable channel when done right.
You don't have to pay Mark Zuckerberg for it, which is nice.
Yeah, but you still pay for it. There's still obviously a cost.
You still pay, yeah, with everything.
I think don't overhype. You need acquisition, but don't overlook the fact that you also need to have a way to keep clients around longer, or at least having them come back to buy more stuff. So if all you sell is projects, you might have to evolve your service offering to have some form of recurring revenue or reoccurring revenue.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Greg, I feel like we could do a whole nother 4 hours. So hopefully do it again. Yeah. I guess for last question, what are you excited about? What are you working on over the next few months?
Yeah, so I'll kind of maybe tease a next episode. But like, one of the things that we talk about at Alt Agency is that to start prompting, how might I think about how I'm going to grow my business in the future? And this is just frameworks that have been teaching our clients, which is what I'm excited about, is think it through the lens of, you have clients, you have members, and you have customers. And clients are the people that are paying you the most. This could be your one-on-one. This could be your custom client. This could be a rev share partner, equity position that your agency takes in a certain brand or client, but you're going to have fewer of them. You're going to have a dozen maybe. Members are like that more done with you layer. It could be your training programs, your memberships, your group coaching or consulting model, right? These are like mid-ticket, probably anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 a month potential. And you could have 50 to 100 of those people, if not more. And then you have customers, which are the products that are truly mostly DIY, your book. If you have a methodology, you could have a book. You could sell a course, right? You could sell templates. You could sell your SOPs. These are like the sell your byproducts conversation, right? You guys are probably using tools in your agency that if you sold them to someone and showed them how to use it, it would be valuable. It could be a calculator, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a framework, whatever. Like, you could monetize those. And so right there, you have kind of 3 different potential revenue streams that you could be exploring. If one of them, you're like, we're at capacity, I don't want to take on more clients at this highest level. How can I think about what membership would look like in my world, or what customers might look like in my world? And I think that kind of opens the realm of, oh, wow, there's a lot of different ways that we could be making money based on the skill set, expertise, and knowledge that we have as an agency owner.
Yeah, that's a really good framework.
Watching people do that and figure that out is like, I think is like what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, it's a good framework. It's a good way to kind of like to simplify the whole thing. And with that, Greg, where can people go to learn more, get in touch, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, you can check out altagency.com, or if you want to hear me talk about this a lot in videos, you can check out my YouTube channel, gregsvideos.com will take you right there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.